Good afternoon. Peter Tanner, Chairman of Taplow Australia, and this afternoon I have with me Tony Karantonis, Managing Partner of Dorman Co. Tony, could we start off by finding out a little bit more about what Dorman Co. do?
Thank you, Peter. Dorman Co. We are a global management consulting firm. We have offices around the world, head offices in Melbourne in Australia. We've been around for for almost 30 years, almost 30 years. And we do projects around the world. Typically, a sweet spot is major transformations across many countries. If you look at where we have deep industry knowledge and where we specialise, I guess we do strategy in a little bit of a different way than most. It can be sometimes the most underwhelming process an organisation can go through. Growth, we do a lot of work in innovation, operations, and also for whatever we all think the word transformation means, organisational transformation. That's who we are, Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tony. Now, you have offices around the world, so it gives you a good indication of what's happening globally from that point of view, from a business point of view. And I know you travel frequently. So how are you managing to tap into those offices around the world, your global clients, now that you can't fly?
So it's been interesting. Obviously, we're not flying. We're either working from home or offices, predominantly like everyone else, where the teams around the world are working from home. The great thing about the global, the ability to have clients around the world in most of the major cities around the world we've been taught as projects have halted, stopped, postponed, altered, reformed into something to slow it down. The conversations of how people are thinking, how people are sensing, what people are doing at a very pragmatic level is now starting to come to fruition. So we're starting to learn a little bit about what this event is doing.
You recently published a white paper around challenges that we're seeing in the marketplace. Could you just expand a little bit about what you wrote in that paper and some of the highlights that you see as we emerge?
The white paper came from a whole lot of, so there's been a regime of speaking. We've decided not to survey. So there's been a regime, a fairly disciplined regime of people, or myself and my senior team and the team under those of ringing quite in a formal but informal way of all our clients around the world. So out of that, the idea was to sort of get a sense of what was happening at the coalface. The white paper, maybe the best thing is to start with the end in mind. We've learnt that the value is going to shift to the organisations, the businesses that move the fastest and know the customer best. That's the headline that we've sort of learnt if we summarise literally hundreds of pages of interview notes. So there's been a shock to the system. And how are people now going to build what's going through? We've put out some other notes to clients to sort of explain to them that really, again, putting the humanitarian side aside, which is unbelievably tragic, this is not much different to all the other businesses that have been going under because of the internet. So this has really been what we've done in this white paper is to talk about what are the shifts in the offices, what are the shifts in the factories, and what are the shifts in supply chains and how that's going on. So that was the purpose of it. But at a very, and the reason for it to be so pragmatic was to understand that all of a sudden, a lot of the power and focus has moved from the centre of the organisation, the CEO and the direct reports. It's starting now, maybe power is the wrong word, to go right to the edges, to what's happening at the coalface is now more important than ever before.
Yes. And you talk about the new management model. What does that mean? What are you thinking of there?
Something that we've learnt, I've always felt the second most important question an organisation can ask itself after what business are you in is what's your management model? There's an invisible thing going around in organisations. There's this invisible thing that gets work done. And sadly, most initiatives and most programs are run by personalities. One minute you have a particular person in a role, they push one way, that person moves on, another one comes in. Most management models are not choices, they're run by personalities. So what we're seeing here, because it's an invisible thing, because decisions aren't explicit, most people aren't even sure what their how the place runs, it just runs. Your management model, it really defines what customers pay for. So what it really is about is, what we're saying is the traditional management model, the one that we've all really known for so long, has been something that's been good around scale. It's been good around getting things done in a way with structures and processes. It's been something that has worked really well for a long time. Whether it was Alfred Sloan back at General, in the 40s and 50s, but I think now for us as an organisation believing that the management model is unbelievably important, that is the key. It needs to move. It really does need to become something that is now more effective than ever before.
So what does that look like when we emerge from this? If you're a middle manager and you're moving up the organisation, what skills do you have to have now to move to the next phase?
I think that it's a really good question. If you look at the definition of a manager, of a coach and a mentor, if you go through, it's almost an impossible job. No one can do it. If you look at the job description of a manager, it's the hardest gig in town. And so what we think now is, we need to be managing a system and not an IT system. We need to make conscious and deliberate choices of what now is important, right? And as I said earlier, a couple of things are very important. Peter Drucker said something I've always really liked. The purpose of a business is to create a customer. I think that simplifies things really, really well. That is the purpose of a business. So all of a sudden, the changes in customer behaviour, how we manage the changes in customer behaviour. The other big thing, speed is going to be more and more and more important. A lot of the organisations that have management models that are a little old school are not designed for speed, right? What we now do, governments are now moving quicker and faster than corporates. People are going from shoelaces to ventilators in 2 weeks. Whereas a lot of large organisations where we do a lot of work, 95% of the energy is running the internal machinery. So the new way of managing people that aren't next to you, the new way of managing teams, the new way of managing outsiders, contractors, the new way that we're going to, the way we're going to share ideas and enable knowledge to flow, it needs a different management system. You can't have KPIs and processes and structures. It needs to be a system that does what it needs to do, because it does come back to the routines we do on a regular basis.
And do you have any thoughts about what industries will evolve the strongest after this?
The answer is, I think there's a few that are going to become very important. We've learnt that food, consumer packaged goods, pharmaceuticals become really, really, really important. I think we've kind of learnt, if you look at consumer behaviour, Peter, we've learnt that location and timing of shopping has changed. What we put in our basket has changed. The customer routines, customer switching, stocking up on things around emergencies. So I think there's going to be, I'm fascinated, I'm kind of over answering this, as we go through, we're fascinating that industries like headphones are booming because people are working from home, and other industries are doing it industries around events, industries. So I think this change, this focus on function rather than status, so rather than buying something for status, we want something that's quite practical. I think companies whose brands look like they're looking after their employees and the community. So I think there's going to be a re-look at what organisations have been doing. So the decisions the chief executives are making now are really setting up both staff and customers on what they're going to, how they get out and what people think about them.
Okay. When we caught up recently, before this, we talked about something that stuck in my mind, and that was the shortage of logistics drivers. And you mentioned to me there's 50,000 truck drivers, correct. And as it's come to pass in Australia Post are way behind on delivery of parcels because they don't have enough truck drivers.
Yep.
Did you see that around the world? Because I think you came back from Poland, if my memory serves me, at a conference or a client over there. I can't remember.
So we had a team in Poznan in Poland for 18 months between Shanghai, Berlin, London and Poznan. And so I actually think it's going to be really interesting now. So to answer the question a little indirectly, I, as a management consultant most of my life, have spent most of my life trying to get a global integrated supply chains to work. So long and wide and do them quick. I actually believe that the next thing that we're going to be thinking about is about short supply chains, short ones. Now, does that mean factories come back? Does that mean shipping, the way we use ships from China and Europe will change? I still think the deliveries to the house, I know so many people, Peter, that are starting to thoroughly enjoy getting boxes at the front door. So I think it will still grow because we've gone from, when you and I were around years and years ago, Peter, it used to be pallets. Now what's happened is they're boxes as big as you can hold in your hand. So deliveries have gone from massive, we spoke about pallets and containers. Now we're talking about an individual parcel right at the house. So I think at the coalface, there'll still be need for people to get it there.
Okay, I know that I stand at the gate excited if a package comes. Unfortunately, I don't buy much online, so I don't know what's going on. Tony, just as we end this, what do you see as the silver linings coming through? So if you were starting a business tomorrow, what would it be?
So the way to answer it is, what I've enjoyed about this is the debate that's coming around. The debate about, so I like when I hear people say business is really kind of simple. Now they're realising it's about selling stuff for more than it costs to make it. That's it. There is nothing more that one needs to do. So what I think is happening in some of our clients, in some of the conversations we're having, is that they're looking at performance relationships differently. They're looking at things, they're looking at management rhetoric and what they're actually doing differently. So it's about what are the drivers that really make a difference? How do we, going back to what I said earlier, Peter, if value is going to go to the organisations, the businesses that move the fastest and know the customers the best, if you can be either one of those, and what's great right now is a lot of the clients are talking about that, the speed issue, and how do we actually become a lot closer to the customer consumer depending on what business you're in.
Tony, that's all we've got time for, so thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Peter.
Just stay safe.
Thank you very much.